I made you here. I'll ping you.
You
Oh, it
can't
says
pay.
I can't ping you. It says your notifications are off.
Okay. All right. I don't know how to turn them on or what to do with that. What's the name of the room?
Total wellness, best sex.
Total. Well,
And I made you a
best,
moderator. You might even be able to, and I'm gonna start this so we don't
best.
lose this. So we're gonna. Hello, everybody. It's another Thursday, and Dr. Dan and I are trying to multitask. So
This is going to be interesting, Dr.
we are
Betsy.
trying to simultaneously broadcast here on Facebook Live and into Clubhouse. So if you're actually in Clubhouse, follow me and Dr. Dan in Clubhouse. We get on there a couple times a week and have some great conversations in the rooms. I'm under Dr. Betsy at and Clubhouse. And Dr. Dan, what's your name on
Oh wait, I'm in here. We just got in here. So I'm
Yes.
Dan. I'm Dan Cartalicchio, and it's Doctor at Dr. Dan at Clubhouse. So follow Dr. Betsy and I, and we'll have some great conversation.
Yeah, so like I said, we are multitasking. So it may be, I know it was funny. We were on a meeting last night with JJ Virgin and Carl Krummenacher, and they were multitasking, and they made it look so incredibly easy. But I have to say,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure this all out myself. Kamisha has just come on. Kamisha, can you hear me?
you know what, Dan, this is why I think that they had somebody as a moderator that was able to let people talk and everything. So
Right.
So right now, just to let people know in Clubhouse, we're also on Facebook Live, so we may not be able to get to questions right away, but then we'll open it up in Clubhouse to do some questions in a little while. So, so today we're just going to talk a little bit about sex. I put in our little thing. We'll talk about sex, baby.
Wait a second. Well, it is Valentine's Day that's coming up, right? And you know, it's Heart Month, so it's Heart Month. It's Heart Month, so
Yes.
there's love in the air. So February is Heart Month, and February has Valentine's Day. And even though I'm in my late 50s, doesn't mean that all of that stuff is gone, Dr. Betsy. And my business partner, Dr. Betsy, just to let everybody know, she's the first female board certified urogynecologist in the country. So she knows what she's talking about. That's really the point. So, you know, I'm blessed to have her as a business partner. So it's all good.
And I wanted to talk about, I mean, we talk about sex. There's so many places that we can start. And this is something we could talk probably about for hours and hours. But, you know, I think I want to bring up is the general understanding that people still think that the sexual response curve that Masters and Johnsons came up with in the 1960s is still how things work. And, you know, this
is a little bit different today.
Well, this is a little interesting because this is what we were taught in medical school. We were taught like, hey, that's the way you do things. And let me tell you, Masters and Johnson were you know, way ahead of their time. So was
pioneers for that time, right?
Yeah, same with Alfred Kinsey, you know, so thank God for them that they actually were there to do this research and open our eyes to these things because, you know, unfortunately, anytime you talk about pelvic health, when you talk about sex, it is kind of like a taboo conversation. I still haven't figured out why that is in our culture. But there does seem to be a lot of shame around sex and a lot of guilt. and that's probably like with anything when we talk about in health, that you have to have the body, mind, spirit all together working for things to work well. Well, that also happens with sex. And
Right.
so, you could do all the things you want to the body, but if you're not stimulating the brain, nothing's going to follow. And you know
I
what?
agree.
And actually, I'm gonna skip over the Masters and Johnson's thing. I'll come back to that. But what I do think about is, everyone's always like, well, when are we gonna get the Viagra for women? When are we gonna get get the pink pill for women? Well, here I got to tell you, Viagra for men doesn't do anything for sex drive. Everybody thinks that that's like the horny pill. It is not. It is not. It's a blood flow pill. That's all it does.
What is that nitric oxide? Is it NO in there that
partial? Yeah, that's
part, right?
Yeah, and so it's dilating blood vessels. And so, in men, when all the physiology is correct and the brain is in the right state, blood flow goes into the penis and we get an erection. That's all it is. So what does Viagra do? It just helps to dilate those vessels so it's easier for blood flow to get where it needs to go.
Right.
But it does not. If a man takes a Viagra and is not in the mood, the brain's not in the right place, nothing is going to work.
Nothing flows from there. However, most of the time, men are in the mood.
Well,
so.
that's the thing. And I still think that we need a lot more research in this area, just because, and it's also not just a hormone thing. Like, people are just like, oh, give me more testosterone and I'll be in the mood.
Hit me up with some tea, right?
But that's not it either. It's such a complex system of how sexual activity and sexual desire comes into being that they're still figuring it all out.
Right.
But going back to the Masters and Johnson's curve, if you guys ever remember seeing that, if you're a healthcare professional and you've taken any kind of classes, that it was like desire, and then it went into like arousal, and then you had your orgasm, you had your plateau, and then you had your orgasm, and then you had your resolution. It was this nice linear type of graph. And that's what we thought how sexual function was. And here's an interesting thing. For the most part, it does fit a lot of what men go through. And this is a generalization, but women, it's a completely different story. And if you're a man who has a female partner, you kind of understand. And especially if you're in a long-term relationship with a female, that this is just not the way things work. Rosemary Basson, who is a pioneer in the kind of psychology of female sexuality, has really regrafted what the female sexual response looks like. And if you actually see it, it's not a nice linear curve. It is this crazy circles within circles within circles. And I think the most important thing out of the way she ends up graphing it out is that a lot of women think that they need to be horny. Let's just say it. That they need to be horny and in the mood to have sex. And yeah, that would be nice. And we see it in the movies, 1 minute people are sitting there and the next minute they're like all over each other. But in real life, if you're a woman who has a career, if you're a mother, if you're, balancing multiple things all at once, sex life is not like the movies where you're rolling in the sand. And it's not like, oh, you look at each other and all of a sudden sparks are flying. And so what Rosemary Basson discovered was that actually that for most women, and I'm talking about, I'm not talking about your 18-year-olds, because that's why a lot of women come into my office and they're like, why can't I be like how I was when I was 18? Well, when you were 18, you didn't have the responsibilities that you have now. You didn't have all the other pressures in life that you have now. So, sex kind of gets put to the side. But so what Rosemary Basson in her graph showed was that for many women, spontaneous arousal doesn't happen first. And so if you wait for spontaneous arousal, you and your partner are going to be probably waiting a long time. But for most women, willingness comes first. So that if you're willing to engage in sexual activity, then all the physiological things start to happen where you get blood flow to the pelvis and lubrication, and then arousal and desire comes. And so, time and time again, when I'm working with patients and we were talking about this, and we say, hey, why don't you try it? Like, just try being more open to the idea of like, all right, maybe you're not in the mood, but maybe make a date and put time aside and be like, okay, let's try this, but work out with the partner that like, all right, if it doesn't go, if it's not working, let's have a way that we can just end this instead of feeling pressured to kind of go through the steps and then not enjoy it and have it be difficult. And so a lot of women, when you take that pressure off and you're like, all right, well, I'll try. And if they have the willingness, then they find that everything kind of starts falling in line, and then things work out. And then they're like, why don't we do this more often?
Yes, please. Can we do this more often? Right.
So, that's probably one of the biggest secrets, is that really it has to do more with willingness than it has to do with actual desire. And then, now we throw in, okay, we're talking about multitasking. Women notoriously pride themselves on the ability to multitask. Sex is not the place you want to multitask, because you don't want to be there trying to engage with your partner and be thinking about like, okay, there's the laundry done. Like, I have this to do at work. Okay, I got to drive the kids to this place, because now your brain's not stimulated. And, time and time again. And like I said, these are all generalizations. I'm sure that there are people out there that have already figured a lot of this stuff out on their own. But, at the same time, I hear it all the time in my office. So that's why I mention it. But, and Dan, I don't know exactly, what I hear from my female patients about their male partners is that the male partners are trying to touch and grab and because maybe for a lot of times for men, the touching is
right
what puts them in the mood. But for women, sometimes the touching and the grabbing, like, you can do all you want to.
It's not going to do anything, right?
Areas, the breast. If the brain is not in the right place, you're just wasting your time.
So what I'm gathering then is that you want us, the men, to stimulate the mind some.
Yes.
Because for a guy, from my own experience and buddies and so forth, it's very tactile. It's touching, it's feeling, it becomes visual, and 0 to 60 is very quick, if you will, at that point. It's not a situation where you have to give me a lot of conversation. There's not, you don't have to, I don't know if it's genetics or whatever the case may be, but it's a very tactile, it's very touchy-feely. It's a situation where it becomes visual, and, oh, honey, you look very nice today, and so forth. And then there's always touching and feeling and kissing. And from there, you go to 0 to 60 very, very quickly, and if you're in I'm married for over 30 years. So what happens is that during the day, some niceties, maybe some flowers, something to make the mood and appreciation, the love, if you will, right? Valentine's Day is coming up, guys. Get your ladies something that's nice, and show them the appreciation and love. That goes a long way, even on the weekends. I could be away at a hockey tournament, and I come back, I'll bring flowers, just to say thank you for, taking care of the house this weekend, taking care of the dog. My wife's a tennis pro, so she's busy all weekend long. So that definitely goes a long way, 100%. Simple. And I'm not even talking about, a conversation about whether it's sex or anything to start the process off, right?
This is one of the reasons why we will never have a pink pill for women, and like I said, the blue pill, or, which is Viagra, but there, you have your other ones like Cialis and all those. it's also not working on the brain. So,
Mm-hmm.
and because everybody's brain is different. So I
Mm-hmm.
can't just, go home and be like, okay, do this and do this, like tell my patients, like, do this and your sex is going to be amazing, because
Right.
you have to really figure out, what is it that stimulates your brain? And
Right.
sometimes that's even just spending time with yourself and trying to figure out what gets you going. So, and then being able to communicate with your partner, like, hey, these are the things that get my brain stimulated. So,
Right.
like, maybe we should try these things, or maybe we should talk about these things. And
Right.
so, I think a lot of times when you're in a relationship, even sometimes it may be embarrassing to talk about some of those things. Your partner really wants to just make you happy. That's the point. So
Right.
and you can't sit there and complain like that they're not making you happy if you're not telling them what it is that you need. So,
I think that's important too, is that communication. What is it that you need mentally, mind, body, and spirit, so that you have that better relationship. I think that's smart to do, right?
and the other thing is we forget, like, everyone goes straight to the genitals, but we forget your skin is your largest organ in your whole body, and it
Right.
has billions and billions of little nerve endings. So that happens to be, I always say the brain is your most important sex organ, and then your largest sex organ is your skin, because you can stimulate other areas of the skin and really create this sexual response. And so you don't need to just go go drive it home and go straight to the genitals. Spend some time elsewhere. um People can orgasm through non-genital touch.
Hmm.
And here's an interesting thing. We talk about, everyone's so focused on the genitals, so focused on the genitals. Do you know that people that are paraplegic, that have spinal cord injuries and have no feeling, from the neck down, from the waist down, they actually have the ability to orgasm. And
Really?
yeah, they have the physiological ability to orgasm because it's a brain thing. So it is not a genital thing.
So
So
they're stimulating different areas of the brain then, in order to reach the peak state at that point. I find that fascinating.
it's a brain reaction as opposed to anything else. Another thing I want to bring up too is we all forget is starting in our 30s, we start losing muscle mass.
Hmm.
And we think about that when it comes to working out. And you're maybe
Have your protein shake.
you're going to you're working out, you're going to the gym. But what about your pelvic floor? Your whole pelvic, like, bowl, like everything within the hips and the whole lower pelvis is muscles.
Right.
And those muscles help with sexual function. So they help with men with delaying orgasm and making it last longer if they have good muscle control.
Hmm.
They help with orgasm for both men and women. So an increased response to, an increased heightened orgasm can
Hmm.
happen because of you get muscular contractions, and it helps with the pelvic floor. So we forget that we're starting to lose those muscles in our 30s. So what do you got to do to keep those muscles healthy? And we think about Kegel,
Right.
but did you know that actually, I've seen two different statistics. I've seen anywhere from 35 to 53% of women do not do Kegels properly. And I'm sure I don't have the statistics on men, but I have a friend who describes your Kegels as if you were in front of the Queen or you were on national television and all of a sudden you had to fart. Well, those are the muscles that you would be doing to hold in that gas as much as possible. And those are
Right.
the muscles that you want to concentrate on to tighten and build. But the thing that's fascinating is we have actually some new technology that is really, really interesting, that does your Kegel exercises at 80 times what you're able to do yourself.
Really? And we have something like that in the office, right?
Yeah, we actually have, it's called
Right.
the Emsella. So people, if you're listening and you're not in the New Jersey area, you can go to, I think it's the company is BTL Aesthetics, and they make a bunch of different devices, but this one in particular uses magnetic energy, and you sit on this device fully clothed, and you sit there. Dan, I gotta get you to try this thing. I know you've walked by it many times. I'm gonna get
I
you.
have walked by it many times, and for all the guys out there, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, what is this? And what does it do? The last time I was in the office, right? Last week you had mentioned, I think, that we're going to try you out on this, and I was like, okay, let's do this. So I think either tomorrow or next week we're going to give it a whirl, if you will,
And
Dr.
I'll get
Betsy.
a videotape of it and we'll put it up on our.
Oh, wait a second.
Well, you sit on it fully clothed. It's so cool. It's just this chair. You sit on it fully clothed. It has this pulsating sensation to it because it's a magnet, and it
Hmm.
basically it's the same kind of magnets they use in MRIs. But every time the magnet gets turned on, it triggers your muscles to contract.
Hmm.
So it's a great way to actually get those muscles back into shape and build up those muscles. Now, I don't think it's something that you need to be doing the rest of your life, or if you want to, it's. I think you can't really have somebody work out for you, but could you get it started? Yeah, but and then learn how to do your Kegels, and whether it's working with a pelvic physical therapist, or even doctors can check to see if you're doing it properly. If you're a
Hmm.
woman, go to your gynecologist and say, hey, can you show me how to do the Kegels? Can you tell if I'm doing it properly? For men, you can go to a urologist. Maybe even some of the family doctors will do this. So, I mean, this is important because where it first shows up, this muscle weakness, it first shows up in sexual function. So
Hmm.
that people will start complaining like, oh, my orgasms are not as strong as they were in the past. And you hear a lot of women who've given birth, they blame it on the
Hmm.
childbirth. Well, it's a lot of times
Right.
that they get muscle damage to that they get damage to those muscles during childbirth, and they're not rebuilding those muscles and putting them basically through physical therapy. So for new moms, doing something like this is a great option because it's
Hmm.
not just like, oh, I had baby. They're like, oh, I had babies and now everything's loose down
Right.
there. No, that's not how it has to be. We can get those muscles back in shape. We can get everything moving the way it's supposed to be. And then, getting with a physical therapy type of
Hmm.
program, and where you're doing your Kegels every day or every other day. And at the same time, if you're doing the Kegels, like, don't go, from 0 to, 100, because it's same thing with any exercise. You all of a sudden like don't exercise, and now you're going to exercise every day of the week. Your muscles are going to get sore, and you're going to be,
Right.
you can actually,
Sure. You're going to be sore.
you can get,
Yes.
you can be tense if you go from 0 to nothing.
Right.
Um, but yeah, with the Kegel, there's something else I was going to say about it. I'm a gadget girl, so anytime there's a machine or a device that does something, I just get really excited about it. So the MCell is a really pretty cool device.
What other devices do we have in the office? Because there's multiple ones that we have
Yeah, and like I said,
and that you're using.
and if you're not in the New Jersey area, these are things you can easily look for. So this is something especially for men and male, female partners, or women. What happens, combination of being on birth control, being a new mom, or being perimenopausal,
Hmm.
the vaginal tissue starts to dry. And that makes sex very uncomfortable. So and especially when menopause, with the lack of estrogen, you end up getting like little microscopic rips and tears in the tissue. And so women do complain sometimes that they feel like they're being ripped open every time they're having intercourse. And
Right.
the options in the past were really pretty dismal, in that all we had was lubricants, which the majority of the lubricants on the market, like your KY, your Astroglide,
Hmm.
your Surgilube, which we used to use all the time in the office for examinations, they actually have drying agents in them. So
Really?
actually purposely have chemical in them that are not pH balanced, that dry the tissue, that actually cause microscopic injuries in the tissue, that actually cause you to have to use more and more and more of that lubricant.
It doesn't sound like that's very enjoyable at
No.
all.
No, so that's why there are some great companies like Good Clean Love that have come out with pH balanced lubricants that are much healthier for the body. So that's, that's one thing that's still a great, those are still great options. But the other options that women had were using hormones, were using estrogen. And, it's still
When you
available.
say estrogen, how do they use the estrogen, Dr.
Usually
Betsy?
it's in a cream. It's usually
The cream.
cream form that can be placed into the vagina. The question that always came up with my patients was, well, if I'm using this and there's something they'd have to use time and time again, and some women complain of it being slimy and uncomfortable. But the problem with the estrogen is, even though the companies say they don't get absorbed into the system when you place it topically, there is still a certain amount that gets absorbed.
Right.
And then there's always the question where it's like, well, what do we do if it gets on a partner? And in traditional medicine, we're like, oh, just have them wash it off. But I question, like, how much is getting absorbed in male partners? So that becomes an issue. So starting in about 2016, they actually came up with some other non-hormonal options to regenerate vaginal tissue, which I wish I was the person who came up with these things, because it was brilliant. They looked at the aesthetics field, and what were they doing in aesthetics to regenerate skin? Well, the number one thing was lasers have been used since the 1980s for skin rejuvenation. So that's what they did, is they developed their first vaginal laser. And so people are like, I'm sure by now people have heard a lot about this, about laser vaginal rejuvenation. So basically the laser just uses light energy to cause a microscopic injury, which sounds bad. I've got to figure out a better way to make it sound nicer, but really it's causing a microscopic hole in the tissue. And that stimulates your body to want to heal itself. So then you get this flood of growth factors into that area. And as those growth factors are healing, they actually are regenerating all the other tissue around it. So for anybody in a low estrogen state, like we said, women on birth control, women who've just had babies, women who are perimenopausal or menopausal, now we can we make that tissue more elastic. We make that tissue more moist. We make it healthier. It's more resistant to urinary tract infections and recurrent vaginal infections, and sex is more comfortable. So this is some of the great options with laser. So then when laser came out on the market, they go, all right, well, what else can we do? And, now that they realize, these companies realize this was a market, like, all right, what else can we use to rejuvenate the vagina? And then they started looking at heat and sound waves. And you have devices like the Votiva or the Genevieve or the Thermiva. There's a bunch of different ones. And that uses just gently heating the tissue to a certain temperature. Will do the same thing. It will actually trigger a microscopic injury, which will then trigger healing and rejuvenation. And back now with coronavirus, these other companies are like, well, how do we? People don't want to leave the house. They don't want to come in for their laser treatments, though the laser treatments are perfectly safe. And but there are now some home therapies, which are amazing. And we sell the V-Fit Plus in our office. So there's a device called the V-Fit. And I wish I had it. I have it at the office. I'll show you. I'm not at the office right now, but it basically almost looks like a vibrator, and it does have a vibrating function. So it can serve two purposes other than just as a rejuvenation device, but it uses red light therapy. And we know that red light therapy can rejuvenate tissue anywhere in the body. And I've joked around with the owner of the company. I'm like, hey, so people, because this thing like glows bright red, and is pretty interesting. So you put it in the vagina, like it lasts for like I think 12 to 20 minutes. And you do that a couple times a week, and it's very warming, and it's got this red light, and that regenerates the tissue. But I've said, oh, you know what? So when you're done with it on the vagina, can you like hold it up in front of your face and like rejuvenate the tissue on your face? And, yeah, theoretically, you
Theoretically.
could. So
Theoretically.
and then another woman, Lana Kerr, and she's also a wonderful woman, developed a product that's a vaginal gel that's non-hormonal that uses something called carboxytherapy.
Mm-hmm.
Carboxytherapy actually, in the past, it's big in Europe. For some reason, it's not that big here in the United States. But carboxytherapy is where it was done where you used to inject carbon dioxide into tissue. And you're like, all right, well, how does that regenerate things? Well, actually, the carbon dioxide actually draws in oxygen. And now when you better oxygenate the tissue, it can regenerate. Mm-hmm. So the way it was done in Europe, it had to be injected into the skin. And so Lana Kerr was investigating this stuff and be like, well, there's got to be a better way to get this product into the tissue without having somebody like sit there and inject all the time. And she came up when she worked with scientists and developed this gel that will cause it to migrate into the tissue. So that they're great options. And actually they're great options to combine so that if you have a laser treatment, if you add on like the VFit, the red light therapy, or if you have a laser treatment and you add on the carboxytherapy, you get an even better result. But now for men, here's another thing. There are a lot of male enhancement options out there too.
Tell me about these.
Now, it's interesting. When I was researching, we were opening our office, our nurse practitioner brought up the idea, well, like we have all these lasers and devices for women. What can any of them be used on men? And I was like, I don't know. And I actually found that George Clooney, no joke, he called it, what did he call it? It was like something like ball ironing. So he had testicles lifted, and he's very pretty. There's articles all over the internet. He had this all you know, in these articles talking about how he had his testicles lasered to rejuvenate and lift them. Because I guess as men get older, they are getting a little self-conscious that things are getting a little droopy, and so you can use any of these heat therapies, these laser therapies, actually to also lift the testicles.
I did, in fact, Google that, and yes, he is inspiring men to get their yes.
So it's interesting. So theoretically, any place that has these devices can also treat men if they're willing to. So that is always an option. But you know, the other thing that's interesting for men is using platelet-rich plasma, because platelet-rich plasma uses your own growth factors out of your blood.
That's interesting. Yes.
And this is something that we don't do in our office yet, but I have taught courses on this, and I have friends that have done this. But there are doctors out there that have proven that you can increase length and girth by combining platelet-rich plasma injections into the penis with vacuum devices.
With vacuum devices. Now, let me ask you a question. Is this painful?
You know, I would think it would be a little bit. I mean, you know, anytime you inject something, it's gonna hurt a little bit.
That's gotta hurt just a little bit, right?
You know, I think when it comes to like the platelet-rich plasma, when we do it other places on the body, you just put a topical numbing medicine. I would think potentially you do the same thing, or even a nerve block if you do it in the penile area. But you know, these things are options. They are definitely right there. So, but you know, once again, you know, there's all these things we can do for the tissue and the body, and this is great. But you also have to work with the mind.
You have to work with the mind. I totally agree with that. And I think that's one of the take homes that males and females can get from our conversation today.
So, and then, we're on, through our office, we are offering a 4-week program called Get Your Sexy Back for Women, where we go more into depth on how to really boost and get your sex life back, boost that desire, increase your orgasms. And we do it it's 4 hours. So 4 hours to get your reclaim your mojo. And you can find that on our website. So that's awesome. I know that we have some people here on Clubhouse, and I know it's tough. This doing Clubhouse and Facebook at the same time is I feel a little schizophrenic here. It's been
I feel a little schizophrenic too doing this,
but
it's all good.
I know I see Kamisha still in the Clubhouse group.
I think we scared everybody off, Dr. Betsy.
I know. So I think next time we do it, I think it's easier for me to do Clubhouse separately. So so people that don't know about Clubhouse, you have to have an Apple product. So that's either an iPhone, iPad, and it is it's an app. You have to I think you have to know somebody or get an invitation for somebody to get into the app. But once you're in the app, and these, I tell people, make an account, and then you sign up for your account, and then you got to know somebody in there. 6 degrees of separation. You're going to know somebody who has an invite.
Absolutely.
So, and then you get in, and it's nice. It's these conversation rooms where you get to interact with other people. So it's not just the social media where it's, like listening to us and watching us. You actually get to interact with people. So I think that's the unfortunate thing, is why we're trying to do this both at the same time. I think we end up losing some of our interaction actually on the
Clubhouse.
On the Clubhouse. So usually what we end up doing is we do the Facebook Live here, and then we transition and we'll go and do
we go into Clubhouse. We tried to do both today, so we learned a lesson today.
Yeah, figuring out the technology. But total off subject, talking about 6 degrees of separation. You know that game where they say like 6 degrees of separation from like Kevin Bacon?
Yes.
You're all part of it now.
Okay. It's all good.
When I was a general surgery resident, his sister was a social worker at the hospital I worked at. So now you're all part of the 6 degrees of separation from
We're
Kevin.
all part of it now. It's all good. It's all good.
So yeah, so there, like I said, this is a subject that we could probably talk for hours. I tried to hit on a lot of the main topics, and talk about some of the technology that's out there right now. But if you want to know more, if you're in the New Jersey area and have any concerns, come on in.
Give us a call. Give us a call.
This is stuff that we can look at your hormones to see if there's any kind of hormonal issues. We can look at your specific issues and come up with a plan. If you're not in the New Jersey area and you are interested in taking our course, that course will be starting next week. It's called Get Your Sexy Back. And you can find it on our website at greenleafbewell.com. If you click under like make an appointment, it'll be under the courses. So
excellent.
And actually, what I have to say is that this is the first time we're going to be offering this course. So this is our beta group. And so because it's the beta group, it's the lowest price it'll ever be.
That's right. So get in now. Get in now because as time goes on, we may add more in and so forth and so on. So, this is a groundbreaking course. So make sure you get in.
All right. So until next week, we will we'll see you again, same time, same place. So it'll be at noon on Facebook Live and starting around 12:30 with Clubhouse.
All right. So everybody take care. We'll see you next week.
Bye.